We're back then with another Chaos Level 20 approved build guide video for Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. It is a gun based guide, this particular one. We're using the Stabbomancer and the Spore Warden class. This was possibly the easiest journey I've had so far on my way to Chaos Level 20. I absolutely smashed through it and I had a lot of fun running this particular build as well. Now in the video how we'll break it all down, we'll start off with an overview where I'll give a bit more information on the build and how it actually works. We'll then check out the skills next. I'll tell you why I'm using particular skills. We have the gear up next. I've done a bit more gearing since the last video because that's what you do when you're working your way towards Chaos Level 20. You have to gear up a little bit, but my gear's not perfect, which means the build will only get better. After we've covered that, we'll then check out the stats and I'll tell you where to allocate your myth points, and then we'll finish up with some gameplay. Now let's dive in. Let's start off with the overview first. So as mentioned then, this is a gun focused build. It's a Stabbomancer and a Spore Warden we're using. I did actually mention it in the previous video, but I'm going to say it again because it really does ring true, and that when you're playing this particular setup it feels very much like an old school shooter game you're playing, like Quake or so on, where you're constantly moving around the map and just burning down enemies. You can see it in the gameplay footage here. It really is a lot of fun, this particular playstyle. Now in regards to some of the stats we've got with this particular setup, we've got around about a 60% active skill cooldown rate. That's really important for this build. Once we get to the skill section I'll explain why. We've got around about 80% movement speed, which just feels a whole lot of fun, although when you change to a different character they feel really sluggish after doing this. Our fire rate, which again is very important, we've got around about 50%, and our gun damage, once we've got various different procs up, is round about 300%. Now survivability comes in one of two ways with this build. One is through our mobility. When we move so fast then we also have a chance to evade attacks when we're moving, but when we're fighting certain bosses then what we'll actually do is we'll aim down the sights instead rather than moving, and we can actually gain up to 50% damage reduction while you're doing that, as well as an additional 50% increase to our gun damage. So that is a quick overview of the build. Let's dive in now and let's break down the skills. So we'll start off here with the active skill. When we use this, every hit we do is actually a critical hit for the duration of it. Now that is relevant because the gun we're using doesn't overheat when we get crit hits, which means we can just hold it down and fire as many bullets as we can, as quickly as we can, and they will be crit hits. That's why earlier on I talked about that fire rate, why I'm actually aiming for that. But if we break down the skills within the Spore Warden tree first, I've made some slight changes to the setup I used in the previous video. So we've got 5 out of 5 here because we want to get our action skill available as soon as we can. I've put 1 point in here because it was a spare point I had to make my companion a little bit more tanky, because my companion was getting down quite a lot, and I have a skill later on when my companion can actually revive me, so I don't want them getting downed at all. We have 5 out of 5 here. I don't go for it for the gun handling, I'm going for the gun damage here. We then go down. I'm skipping, actually I'll mention this, I used to use Spore Cloud. There was one point in this before where the companion would taunt, but with it taunting it's more likely to actually go down, so what I've done instead is put the point in here, increased health for it. I don't want it taunting and getting downed and then it can't actually get me back up. The way it gets me back up is through medicinal mushroom, which you can see here, 1 point wonder. We then have quiver of holding. This is essential because we burn through ammo so quick with this build. We need the additional 3% per second that we get back. You really do need this. Now moving on, we have Windrunner. This particular one, it's a kill skill, so we get movement speed and fire rate stacks 2 times, which means when we kill 2 enemies and do that before you're fighting a boss, for example, take down 2 minions, and then you're getting 40% fire rate and 40% movement speed, which is just incredible. Now we're also using cold shot, which contradicts to an extent the fact we're using movement speed. So what I would say is when you're going through a regular level, use your movement speed and keep moving about. When you come to certain bosses, I don't know the name of the particular boss, but the big massive boss that comes out the water, and he's got something like 3 phases, this is when I'll actually aim down the sights to take down this particular boss. The reason being there's not a lot of room to move, and when I'm aiming down the sights after 10 seconds I get a whopping 51% damage resistance, which is just absolutely huge, and 53% gun damage as well. So I will alternate between moving fast and aiming down the sights. Aiming down the sights, as mentioned, is normally just for certain bosses. We then have Headhunter, so we're gaining additional gun damage here when we get a crit hit that is a crit hit on a crit hit area, not one of our automatic ones during invisibility. We then have Wrath of Nature, so whenever the Fate Maker deals ability damage to an enemy, the affected enemy takes increased damage from all sources For a duration, 54%, which is a whopping amount. We get our ability damage via this played at angles. So with this particular one here, there's a chance that bullets ricochet. They do ability damage. I found sometimes, for example, when I'm doing a level, if I need to take down the statue, I'll activate my active skill, I'll activate my spell, I'll fire it off on the statue, and the bullets that are firing off it, because I'm getting every hit being a crit, can actually take out badasses. So it's really pretty amazing. So that's the skills I'm using for the Spore Warden tree. Let's look at the Stabbomancer. So we start off here with 5 out of 5. This gives us an additional 15% gun damage. It's not the strongest, but we need to use it to get further down the tree. We've then got 5 out of 5 in potent poison, so it's status effect damage and status effect duration. We're making heavy use of the frost effect, that's why this is so good. We've then got swift death, this particular one. The faster we're moving, the more damage bonus we get, and bear in mind we've got that 80% movement speed. There's 2 points in this, but it comes from a gear. I didn't actually put them in it myself. We've then got this one here, a 1 point wonder, so default walk speed, you've got a 10% chance to evade, so that must go to a decent amount when you've got 80% movement speed and you're moving about, and I don't actually really have any problems with survivability at all on this build, and I imagine that must be playing a large part in it. And then finishing up, just some spare points I had here, they go into contagion. So this particular one, it's a spread chance for your status effect, so other enemies will get frozen, and if you've got frozen enemies, and then if we think back here just for a second, you've got your bullets ricocheting as well. It's just amazing. You can burn down one enemy, and as a result of burning them down, you'll freeze other enemies and you'll do ability damage and kill other enemies as well. It really is pretty awesome. But that's the skills. Let's look at the gear now. So gun wise then, we are using a legendary, which is definitely on the OP side at the moment, but the main reason we're using it is due to how it synergises with our kit, so it will still synergise well with that, even if and when it is nerfed. So it's all about the fact that this gun, when you get a crit hit with it, it doesn't actually heat up, so you'll proc your active status effect. Every hit you do is a critical hit. Your gun doesn't overheat. You can just hold down the button, you fire through bullets as quick as you can, and all of them will be crit hits. That's why that fire rate was important as well. This legendary can be target farmed from an obelisk in Crack Mast Cove, so that's where you go if you're looking for this particular one. And again, as mentioned, yes, it's OP at the moment, but it will still work fantastic with this build due to the way the crits don't build up the heat on it. The enchanted status on action skill start, increase status effect chance and damage by 20% for 10 seconds. Melee weapon, I'm just going for the enchanted status on this. It's on action skill start, increase damage dealt by 20% for 20 seconds. So when we get that invisibility and all the crits, we're gaining additional damage here. Looking at the rings, of course you want gun damage on both of them, and then there's 2 particular perks you're looking for. They're spread out over the rings, I've not got a perfect one yet. You want action skill cooldown rate or action skill cooldown duration, you want that, and you also want pistol critical hit damage. That is fantastic in this build due to all the crit hits we'll actually be getting, in the gun we're using of course is a pistol. Looking at the shield here, the main reason I'm using this, I can't see any shields really synergise with this particular setup, so the main reason I'm using it is for the capacity. 7,400 is absolutely huge. The armour I've got here, I'm using this one not really for the boost to my skills at all, but I'm using it for the perks. So that is the gun damage and the all damage dealt, and to an extent the gun critical hit chance. That will be useful when I don't have my active skill up and I'm getting auto crits. Looking at the necklace I've got here, so frost damage, you can go for frost damage or gun damage, then you've got Stabbomancer or Spore Warden power, and then the reason I'm using this is a 20% action skill cooldown rate, which is actually a whopping amount. That's a real great amount to get there. You can also get flat damage on this. If you can get that, then look out for that as well. The spell I'm using, again, one that if you equip it in the right hand it's broken, but when you're using it in the left hand I believe it's working as intended, so this shouldn't see any changes. This is basically a buff, so the way the setup works is I'll proc my active skill, so every hit will be a crit hit, and then I'll proc this spell so that I'm then getting a boost from it, and then you're getting all your enchanted status boosts as well. You can see this one is perfect actually. On spell cast, increase gun damage by 30% for 10 seconds. Now I'm going to jump over very quickly to 2 other gear pieces I've got, because these are ones ideally I'd be looking for with different perks. You can see down the bottom, this one is perfect for this setup if you can get the right skills and perks in it. Total critical hit chances reduced by 50%, which doesn't matter when all your hits are auto crits when you've actually got your active skill active. Critical hit damage is increased by 50%. So this is amazing. You just need to get the skills and the right perks on it, which I've not got yet. And then we've got this necklace here, which could actually be nice. I think it's the best one I can see for this setup. Whenever you cast a spell, reduce your remaining action skill cooldown by 20%, while your action skill is on cooldown, spell damage is increased by 30%. So we're using that for the action skill cooldown. Just make sure you don't use it while you're invisible. It has to be when the skill's actually in cooldown, which happens after your invisibility ends. So that is all the gear. Let's talk about the stats in the myth rank now. So stat wise then, the primary focus I had first was the skill cooldown, so I can get as high uptime on my invisibility as I can get. So we've got that up at 40 out of 40. From there we've got a nice amount of points in strength, 48 at 48. It was Village Idiot I went for as my actual character type, so that gives me an additional 47.5% crit damage. And then from there, the remaining points I put them into some survivability here, an additional 57.5% hit point and ward. But let's check out the myth rank now. So the myth rank's a bit of a pain in that it's universal for all characters, so once you start leveling it, that's it. You can't modify it on a character basis, but what I would recommend going for is you go for your loot luck here under Druid, so that's actually really pretty nice. And then we've got this one here, which is intelligence. It means you can get your spell quicker. That's your Buffmeister. We move down here, we've got strength, which is your crit damage, constitution, which is your health and your ward, and then finishing up here, the one that I would go for is your movement speed. That works absolutely awesome. And then you could also go for the fire rate if you were going for this particular build. That would work really nice with that. But that's everything you need to know to run the build, so what we'll do now is show off some gameplay. Now, as always, if the video has been helpful, take the time to hit the like, share and subscribe button and enjoy this gameplay. Thanks for tuning in, stay safe, and I'll see you all again soon.